Welcome back, Leo Lions. This is Mrs. Morgan with today's lesson over proportional relationships, and we're going to be able to look at it from a scenario point of view. We've done a lot of work with slope, constant of proportionality, proportional relationships. Now we're going to look at this as a story problem, and then we're going to take that story problem and represent it in multiple ways, in a graph, in a table, constant of proportionality, and also write an equation for it. So this scenario is about going for a walk. Here is our story. Miss Johnson walks at a rate of 2 miles per hour. I'm going to highlight some things. Follow along with me here. So whenever we have a story problem, it's important to pull out important details. So we have a rate that we were told. Now notice down below here, I'm going to highlight in green, X is our hours. So we have per hour. Per hour up here means per 1 hour. Okay? The Y we have as miles walked. So the number of miles that Miss Johnson walked was 2 miles. So we have 2 miles per hour is her constant rate that is changing throughout this story. Okay? So, if you notice then, in our graph, our x-axis is labeled in hours. Notice it is the same as what we have up here, x equals hours. In our table, we have x values. So we know all these x values, 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, those are all hours. Okay, now in orange, we highlighted miles walked. That's our y. So on our y-axis, which is our vertical axis, it's labeled miles walked. Those match. Also then over here in our table, we have to create those y values. So we're going to list those out by using those x values and then figure out what the y's are. And then we're going to plot some points. All right, so let's look over here and create a table first. So X, remember, is our number of hours. So we were told that Miss Johnson walks 2 miles per hour. So I'm just writing out what we already know. Now, if we have gone 0 hours, how many miles has Miss Johnson walked? Well, 0 hours, we haven't gone anywhere because it says 2 miles per hour. So it has to go 1 hour to get those 2 miles. So at this point, we will have walked 0. And Y, remember, is miles walked. So now we have 1. So after 1 hour, so per, remember, that means 1. So 1 hour, 2 miles has been walked. Okay, now after 2 hours, so 2 miles per hour, so if there's 2 hours, then that would be 4 miles. 3 hours, so we'd multiply that 2 by 3, we have 2, 4, now 6 miles we've walked. And then after 4 hours, 2, 4, 6, 8 miles that we have walked. So there we just created a table based on what we were given in our story problem. Now we can use these. So in our table, what we really just did was made a ordered pair, x comma y. So we'd have 0, 0 as an ordered pair. We'd have 1, comma 2. And we can also use the x and the y axes to plot all of these points and see what it looks like on the graph. So 0 hours, 0 miles walked. So on our x-axis, we have our hours. We'll go to 0, and 0 is right here. So then the next ordered pair, we have 1, comma 2. So 1 hour, we're going to go to 1 hour on the x-axis. We've walked 2 miles. 2 hours, we've walked 4 miles. 3 hours, we've walked 6 miles. 4 hours, we've walked 8 miles. So there are those 5 ordered pairs that I wrote over to the right in that table box. Once we get those drawn, well, then we can connect those points and create a line. So there it is represented on the graph. Constant proportionality. So constant proportionality is the exact same thing as slope. So what is that slope? We could look at rise over run. So remember, rise, we would pick 2 points. Let's say we pick this point and this point. It doesn't matter. You could pick any 2 points. Our rise would be up 1, 2. That would go on the top of the fraction. Forward 1, so our run is 1. So 2 over 1, our slope is 2. That's our constant proportionality. That matches also our 2 miles per hour. So we could find it in our table up here. So our slope is 2. Now, our equation, how we write this for proportional relationships. If you remember at one time, we had talked about y equals kx. So this is also the same thing as y equals mx. So both of these are the same thing. We're going to keep our y and our x in it and just replace the variable m or k. Same thing, slope or constant proportionality. So our equation would be y equals 2x. Now, how we could use that is then x represents, remember I highlighted in green, x was our hours, we found it in our rate, we found it in our table, we found it in our graph. Well, look, we also have it in our equation. There's our x. They all represent the same thing. Now, in orange, I highlighted the y, miles walked. That was our y-axis on our graph. That was our y in our table. And now it is our y in our equation. So if we wanted to use this equation, I'm going to write my own question here. So how many miles will Miss Johnson walk after, let's say, 6 hours? Now, we could use our graph, but we could also use that equation, y equals 2x. We know that x represents our number of hours. We've highlighted that in several spots here. So we're going to replace the variable x with our 6. So y equals 2 times, remember, right next to x, that means multiply. So we get y equals 12. And we know that y represented miles. So after 6 hours, she will have walked 12 miles. Okay? So there's one scenario. Let's go for one more with measuring length. So now we've got another story. We've got x representing yards. So we have 1 yard in our problem here. We have 3 feet equivalent to 1 yard. Remember that x is the same thing on our x-axis. It's the same thing in our table, and it's also going to be the x in our equation when we go to write that. The y represents feet, so we have what we're given in our story is 3 feet is equivalent or equal to 1 yard. Here's our y in our table, and then our y-axis is the vertical axis. So we know 3 feet is equivalent to 1 yard. So remember, x represents, if we need to write it down, it may help, represents yard. So 1 yard, we know this equals 3 feet. All right, 0 yards. Do we have any feet yet? 0 yards would be 0 feet. 2 yards, so if 1 yard is 3 feet, 2 yards is double it, 6 feet. 3 yards, so 3 then times 3, we'd have 9 feet. And 4 yards, we'd have 12. So I'm using that 3 feet equals 1 yard from our story to create the rest of my table. Okay, again then, all of those are ordered pairs. So 0 yards is equivalent to 0 feet. 1 yard is 3 feet. Notice on your x-axis, they go by 2. So 2, 4, 6. So to get to 3, it'd have to be right in the middle of 2 and 4. All right, 2 yards is 6 feet. 3 yards is 9 feet. So again, we have to go in between our 8 and our 10. So right in between will be 9. And then 4 yards we had as 12 feet. And we could keep going, but our table, that is all that is included in there. So we're going to connect those points and draw arrows to show our line. So there's our graph and our table. So what is our constant of proportionality? Or remember, same thing as slope. So that is our constant rate of change. We could find it from the table again. We could pick any 2 points. Find your rise. Now be careful because the graph doesn't go by ones anymore. It goes by twos. So from this point, we'd have 1, 2, 3. And then this would be 1. Notice on our x-axis, we're going from 3 to 4. So it's always important to pay attention to those. So the slope would be 3 over 1. We could pull it from the graph, we could pull it from the table, and we could also pull it from the scenario, the story. So the slope is 3. So our equation is y equals 3x. Remember, we're just using y equals mx or kx, same thing. You are just replacing the m. So again, our x, we highlighted everything in green, so that x represents the number of yards. So 3 times however many yards, and then the y gives us the number of feet it is. So we're just using conversions. So again, write your own question. Let's say, let's pick a point on this graph. Let's say this point here. I'm going to do this point, 2, 6, since they're both whole numbers. So what does the point 2, 6 mean? What does it represent? So this is saying the 2 is your x. So 2 represents yards. We could use our labels here. So that represents 2 yards. And then on the y-axis, 6 feet. And I'm using my labels to look at what they represent. So 2, 6 represents 2 yards is equal to 6 feet. All right, so if you're ever asked